You're standing outside as the light fades for what feels like the last time. Not sunset, not dusk, the last time. The sun dips below a ridge of frozen mountains, and for the next several weeks, it will not come back. Not at noon. Not at all. Above the Arctic Circle, in the northern reaches of Viking Age Scandinavia, this isn't a rare event. It's the calendar. Your breath hangs in front of your face. The cold isn't the kind that passes. It settles into the wood of your house, into your joints, into the hours you have left before true dark. Think about the last time your power went out for one night. The candles, the silence, the way time got strange. Now stretch that feeling across weeks. For most of Viking history, darkness like this wasn't an inconvenience. It was survival. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how Viking communities in the far north kept their bodies fed, their minds intact, and their bonds unbroken, through a darkness most of us will never have to face. Here's what almost nobody talks about. The sun doesn't vanish all at once. It fades. Day by day, it climbs a little less high over the horizon. The window of daylight shrinks, not to zero, but close enough that light and dark start to blur into one long gray hour. Then one day, it doesn't climb at all. This is the polar night. Above the Arctic Circle, for weeks at a time, the sun simply does not rise. Not rises late, does not rise. For a Viking family in the far north of Scandinavia, this wasn't a surprise. The sky had been warning them for a month. But knowing it's coming and living inside it are two different things. Historians believe communities in this region tracked the sun's retreat carefully, watching the horizon, marking the shortening days, because the return of light mattered enough to count toward it. Time itself started to run on a different clock. Not hours, not sunrise to sunset, just dark. And how long until it isn't? And here's the part that's easy to miss from the comfort of an electric-lit house. For these communities, darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a test of stored food, of firewood, of each other. The sun goes down, and the real work begins. So what do you actually do with weeks of darkness? You don't just sit in it. You light it up as best you can. Archaeologists have found small stone and clay lamps across Viking Age sites, and residue analysis on some of these vessels shows they were burned using animal fat, whale oil, fish oil, tallow rendered from cattle or pigs, whatever the region and season provided. The wick was often something simple: moss, lichen, dried grass, anything that would hold a slow, steady flame. This wasn't decorative lighting. It was the difference between a household that could function after dark and one that couldn't. And in the far north, in areas of Arctic Norway including the region around modern Troms, where archaeological finds confirm Norse settlement alongside long-established Sami communities, that difference mattered more than almost anywhere else in the Viking world. Some weeks, that little flame was the only light for miles. Under it, life didn't stop. It just moved indoors, and it moved to the hands. Wool got carded and spun. Looms were strung and worked, turning raw fiber into cloth for the next year. Wood was carved, spoons, bowls, the handle of an axe that cracked last summer. Tools got mended before they were needed again. Nets were repaired for a fishing season that felt impossibly far away. None of this was busy work. It was the off-season economy of an entire household, compressed into the hours a small flame could light. The polar night didn't pause Viking life. It just moved it closer to the fire. Picture the inside of that house now. One fire, one lamp, walls built to keep in every last degree of warmth. And everyone, parents, children, grandparents, maybe a hand or two from outside the family, pulled into the same small circle of light. There was nowhere else to be. No separate rooms glowing with their own screens, their own silence. Just one space, shared by necessity, for weeks on end. So the work became the gathering. A hand carving a spoon sat beside a hand spinning wool, beside a child watching both, beside someone telling a story they'd told before, maybe about a journey, maybe about the ancestors, maybe just about last summer, retold slowly because there was nowhere to rush to. Historians and folklorists have long pointed to winter as the season when oral storytelling carried the most weight in Norse households, when sagas, genealogies, and half-remembered histories got passed from the old to the young, because for once, everyone was in the room to listen. This is easy to romanticize, and it wasn't always warm. Close quarters for weeks meant tension too, tired nerves, short tempers, the strain of too many people and too little space. That was part of it as well. But something else was part of it too. Forced proximity became forged connection. The same darkness that threatened the body also built something the daylight months rarely had time for. A family that had nowhere else to be, being fully, unavoidably present with each other. The fire didn't just keep them warm. It kept them together. But let's not pretend the darkness was only cozy. Weeks without direct sunlight take a real toll on the human body and mind. Sleep patterns shift, energy dips. For some, mood follows the light down with it. We don't have to guess at this secondhand. In Tromsø, Norway, well above the Arctic Circle, in a region shaped by the same polar night, modern researchers have spent years studying exactly what weeks of darkness do to a population's sleep and mental health. One long-running study found that sleep problems do rise in the dark months. But overall mental distress, across the population, doesn't spike the way outsiders often assume it should. Psychologists studying the region point to something they call a wintertime mindset, a cultural framing of darkness not as something to endure, but something to work with. Slower days, firelight, rest treated as useful, not lazy. It's reasonable to think Viking communities, generations earlier, needed some version of that same mindset, simply to make it through, not because the dark didn't weigh on them, but because they'd built an entire way of living around the fact that it would. Then, one day, it happens. A thin line of gold on the horizon. Not warmth yet, just light. The sun clearing the ridge for the first time in weeks. For a Viking community in the far north, this wasn't a small thing. It was the proof that the system had worked. The stores had held. The fire had held. The people had held. Maybe that's the real lesson buried in the polar night. Endurance was never about fighting the darkness. It was about building a life, work, firelight, each other, that could carry you through it until the light came back on its own. If this kind of history hits different for you, hit like and drop a comment. I read every one. And if you want to see what happens when Vikings had the opposite problem, the sun that never sets, go watch the video on your screen right now. Tell me, could you handle weeks without seeing the sun? Or would it break you by week 2?